Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the T-Work podcast. Joining Banko and I today is a good buddy of ours, Brad Reibel. He's a fellow Eckerd Triton from the class of 2016. He is a Chicago suburb native, has spent time both as a soccer player in college as well as a basketball player, made a few stops in his academic and athletic career as a UIC Flame, a Harper Hawk, Eckerd College Triton. Then, after a brief stop in the corporate world at Aon, went on to get his master's degree of secondary education. There we go. I know Banko doesn't edit anything, so that stutter will be right in the middle of the podcast. Thank you ahead of time. But Bradley went to Roosevelt in downtown Chicago for that. He has now entered his sixth year of teaching in the Schaumburg district, heading up the business classes there, and as the head women's basketball coach for Hoffman Estates. I know he also does some work on the AAU circuit, and he is well on his way to being a scratch golfer. At least that's what his memberships would say to the multiple courses in the Chicagoland area. So with that, Bradley, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yep, and we appreciate you bringing a mug. We're gonna lie and say it's tea. You wanted to fit the tea work mold and just look cool with us.
We can go with that.
I'm gonna be double fisting green tea over here. I'm ready for a long one.
You have us all covered. Perfect.
That's right. Yeah, because you don't have anything, do you?
I do not.
That's right. So, Bradley, I know we loosely talked about the T Work platform before this, what we like to discuss. You have made a few shifts in your career, I would say, whether it's school, location, pursuit of career. You've really done it all. So change seems like it's been something that is consistent in your life. So let's start it back from the beginning. Grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Tell us about the upbringing, sports, high school, all that. You're the baby of the family as well. Has that
Yeah.
shaped you into who you are?
Yeah, that's probably a question I haven't really wrestled with myself as far as where I stand in like the family tree. But just kind of grew up in we always say Chicago, but definitely suburban Chicago, about 25 miles from the city. Went to Prospect High School, and played really three sports for the first 3 years of high school with soccer, basketball, and baseball. And then things kind of started picking up between soccer and basketball for me. So decided to not play baseball the last couple of years, which, reflecting back, actually something that I kind of regret in ways. But just from a schedule standpoint, it just became very challenging with the club soccer circuit that I was playing and things like that. But yeah, I mean, being the baby of the family, I don't know, did it shape me? I mean, in ways, I suppose, because the baby of the family is the one who gets to kind of look up to their siblings. And so obviously I had a brother who went through a lot of the same challenges I did athletically, as well as just learning from him, and my sister as well, who is in education now. And really it's funny because my sister and brother are now both educators. So I guess it was just kind of the way we were raised, despite neither of my parents being educators. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if we want to bury the lead and maybe we'll just open it up and this will take us wherever we
Yeah.
want to go. You made the choice a couple years out of college to make the jump from a pretty snazzy corporate job
Yeah.
for a 23, 24-year-old to then go back, go to school and become an educator. What sparked that?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny you bring up that comment because I felt like my athletic career path kind of mirrored what my professional career path was. Like I ended up going to, as you mentioned, UIC to play soccer for a year and kind of realizing like that's not my passion. Like it's not what I want to do on a daily basis. So ended up obviously transferring to Eckerd and then had what I felt was ended up being a great experience there and just really lucky to be on a good team by my senior year. And I kind of felt the same way from a corporate position, which is funny. I didn't really learn from what I did from soccer to basketball, but I went into a job at Aon. And one of the biggest reasons I took a job there was mostly because not to say my parents were pushing me there, but we did have a contact there that we knew, and he was able to, not get me the job, but get me interviews so that I could get the job, and then I did get the job, but it was kind of like me going in blindly. Like I wasn't fully sure what I was getting myself into with the corporate world, and I found out pretty quickly. I mean, I'm talking within probably 6 months to a year, where I was looking at myself and going, I'm not sure this is for me. And that was really hard because it's like somebody kind of stuck their neck out for you too at Aon to help me get that job. And fortunately, he's great. I mean, he was a college baseball player and an athlete, so like he kind of got my perspective when I told him I was going to be moving on. But I think the things that I learned from changing what I was doing from soccer to basketball and Aon to teaching is that you should probably attack the things that you're most passionate about. And the teaching thing has been phenomenal for me. Honestly, it's much more dynamic than what I was doing in the corporate world. And then it also just gives me the ability to coach basketball, which probably after stopping playing basketball at Eckerd, I had no intention of ever coaching. Like it wasn't something that was on my radar. It wasn't something I really wanted to do. In fact, I was kind of like, I'm like a basketball player. I'm not a coach. Like that's not what I want to do. And it's funny because I ended up getting an opportunity to coach like sixth, seventh, eighth grade basketball, and I really liked it, and I never thought I would end up coaching, and that's kind of propelled me kind of to doing a lot of it actually. So
Out of curiosity, what do your parents do? Just because like your siblings are in education, you're in education, and
yeah,
you mentioned they're not. So just curious how that came about and what that background was.
yeah. So my mom is retired, but she worked in insurance as well. So there was a background with that. It was not the same insurance. It was more benefits on the benefits side. I was in corporate risk management at Aon, so setting up the insurance plans for Fortune 500 companies, like whether it's a general liability policy or whatever. I mean, everything to be honest. And then my dad. He originally started out what was my grandpa's company, and it was a rivet company. I don't know if you guys know what rivets are, like a metal fastener.
Hmm.
And so he did that for years. My grandpa was the president there, and then after that, he's been working at a metal finishing company for a long time called SWD, and he's done a bunch there as far as like sales and other things as well. So that's pretty much what he's done the entirety of my life. Like I was super young when he was at the Rivet Company, but he's worked at SWD for a long time. So
Yeah. Also, Red Reibel, father of Bradley, college
yeah,
baseball player at Illinois State,
right.
extremely good baseball player too.
Yeah. So I mean, and I mean, I think we all probably feel this way with our parents, or I mean, if there's probably no better role model to just instill like work ethic. I mean, I don't remember it's like a little thing you take for granted, but I don't ever remember my dad like getting up in the morning and like complaining about having to go to work. Like
Hmm.
he just always went to work, and like that's something I've started to kind of learn. And I mean, I imagine how, I mean, he's told me as much, but I mean, I complained every day when I was there, like every day. Like I got to do, I mean, I was still living at home at the time. Like I got to do this. I can't do this. I'm not sitting at a desk for 8 hours. And like reflecting back, I'm like, damn, like I hope I got all my complaining out of the way. Like I don't want to be that person that complains about their job and doesn't change their circumstance. So
Yeah. Another side of the Aon thing, how much did you have to fight with the greed early on, if you did maybe? Because I know it was a decent paying job, especially for
yeah,
a 23-year-old
yeah,
to have right out of school to go in, work in the city. You're
yeah,
saving money living at home. I
yeah,
remember going to visit you a couple times and just seeing what you could do or the comfort that you
yeah,
had. was
Yeah.
amazing to me. I was like, oh my gosh, like I
Yeah.
wish I could live that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody wrestles with that, and I think that's why they say the longer you stay in a corporate position, the harder it is to get out. And I actually remember a guy that I worked pretty closely with at Aon just telling me he's like, after I told him I was leaving, and it's been like probably a year and a half or so, like, hey, I'm done here. This isn't for me. And like we had a good relationship and worked really well together. And I remember him just like looking at me and be like, if you're going to get out, this is the time to get out because the money's going to get really, really good. And once the money gets really good, he's like, it's going to be impossible to leave. Like, you're not going to want to leave anymore because of that money. Or not to say you're not going to want to leave, but it's going to just be difficult to leave what that paycheck would be. And so, I mean, I am fortunate in the sense that the district that I'm in Illinois is a really, really good district as far as pay goes. One of the best districts. And so it's not necessarily something that I was wrestling with like too much, where it's like, I'm not going to get paid anything, especially in the state of Illinois. And I know teachers, to be quite honest with you, would have been really hard to leave in some other states. It just would have been. So fortunately, where we're at, we do okay.
I was gonna go down that rabbit hole a little bit. Do you
Yeah.
think you would have made the decision if you were in a different state? I mean, I grew up in Florida. I know teachers are not paid as
Yeah.
well compared to other
Yeah.
states. Do you think you would have been able to do it in like
I
a
mean,
state like Florida?
if you want my honest comment, the answer is probably no, because the discrepancy is just so large. So, I mean, you'd love to say like, yeah, I followed my passion, but that's more so because it was aligned with still having somewhat of a comfortable lifestyle. I mean, if they told me I was going to make $40,000 a year to teach, that wouldn't have been something that I would have probably done. So, not to mention what we get for coaching as well. I mean, that's another bump that Florida doesn't really do that either. So
Yeah. And Brad, when did teaching kind of come into play? When did you realize that that was the specific path? Because you
yeah,
obviously realized that Aon or working in the corporate world wasn't necessarily the move for you.
yeah,
But did you wrestle with going different paths out of
yeah.
Aon, or did you know right away education is a path you wanted to pursue?
By the time I was at Aon, I knew that I was going to go into teaching if I changed careers. Like there wasn't really like, oh, I'm going to go from Aon to another corporate job. It was pretty much, if I'm going to change careers, I'm going to change careers, and I think I'm going to go into teaching. Which, believe it or not, I mean, that's a very common jump, at least with the business teachers around us. There's like quite a few that go from a corporate position, whether they worked it for 2 years or 10 years or 20 years, that go into teaching. In fact, I have two colleagues that pretty much followed the exact same path. I mean, they were in their other jobs for about a year and a half, 2 years, and just kind of decided like this isn't for me, and got back into teaching. And it's funny because I look at them and it's like one of them was a college basketball player, one of them was a college baseball player, and it's just like, and what do they want to do? They want to go into teaching and they want the opportunity to coach. And it's like three of us that look the exact same. So I always thought that was kind of funny. But as far as like education, did I grow up thinking I was going to be an educator? Not really, but I didn't really grow up thinking, I mean, this sounds bad, but I'm not sure I really grew up thinking I was going to be like any profession. Like that wasn't really on my radar. I didn't think I was going to be a professional basketball player, but that was like my sole focus when I was growing up. Like being an athlete, that's what I thought about. I didn't think about being a professional basketball player. I didn't think about getting a different job. I just thought about like, all right, what's in front of me now? What am I going to do to become a better basketball player or better athlete? And so it's funny that you mentioned that, because like my dad told a story the other day, and he's like, yeah, 2 weeks before college ended for Brad, he had no clue what he was doing, none. And he's like, and my dad was like telling my mom, like, you realize he graduates in 2 weeks and he has zero lined up for the next year, nothing lined up. And so actually, I think probably 3 weeks prior to that happening, my dad's like, well, why don't you start thinking about education? And I told him like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not doing that. And I mean, lo and behold, that's what I ended up being later on. So
I know coming out of Eckerd, you briefly kicked around going to play a fifth year somewhere back at one of the Illinois schools or
Yes.
something like that, going
Yes.
to grad school right away.
Yeah. Yep.
What kind of halted that pursuit?
Yeah, so honestly, it's just the schools around here is just like the numbers didn't work out. And it was kind of like, yeah, we can give you scholarship money, but we can't give that much money to a grad student. So I wasn't going to be getting enough to make it worth it, in my opinion. But like one of my good friends, who we were actually going to try to play together, he ended up kind of doing it. Like he didn't get a full scholarship, but ended up having to pay some of the money. And that's just not something that I was, I guess, comfortable doing. So, and looking back, I don't know. I go back and forth with it because it's like, dang, that was probably my last year to play like competitive basketball. But it was also like, was it financially a good decision not to put myself in more college debt, if that makes sense? So,
Yeah. But don't talk too much about poor competition because at least you have the suburban men's leagues that you can get runs in. And I know
yeah,
that's a very
that's true.
important part of your life.
Yeah, you're right. I play quite often as much as I can. So just keeps me in shape.
Do you just think back now at your Aeon? I don't know how to
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah.
it. The
No, you got
trip.
it.
All right. Do you see that? I mean, you said you woke up basically like, I hate this. I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
Adam and I have talked about our college careers ending and like the different timing of realizing I'm not an athlete anymore and struggling
yeah,
with that at different times. Do you think that was your timeline of that, of
yeah,
realizing it once you're actually in the
yeah.
office job?
So that's probably something that's not talked about enough, and it's weirdly hard even for like a Division II basketball player that was playing like 10 minutes a game, like separating myself from being like an athlete to not being an athlete anymore. And it sounds like something that like only somebody that's in the NBA or the MLB should have to wrestle with. Um, because like it's like, shouldn't we all have better plans than that? Like, shouldn't we have known that? So that was really challenging for me, to be like, completely honest, where it was like, holy crap, like I don't play basketball anymore. Like when I wake up in the morning, like what's actually my purpose? Like what, like, you know what I mean? Like what do I do with my day? Because my whole day was completely centered around like, all right, I need to go to the gym then. I need to lift weights then. I need to watch basketball at night. And then all of a sudden it was like that was completely gone. And it's like, no, now go work in corporate risk management. It's like, whoa, that's different. So that was really challenging for me. Really challenging. And I'm sure you guys wrestle with the same thing.
Oh yeah, I struggled with it immensely. I think probably because I was chasing off the injury bug for so long
Yeah.
too that I was trying to figure out what my ceiling really was,
Yeah.
and instead of it, yeah, that's a whole different discussion. I was just trying to prove to myself, is it me, like my talent's the limiting factor, or is it injury that's inhibiting me from getting there? But I want to know now, based on that similar discussion, did you feel that you struggled at all with the sense of self coming out of that transition of being an athlete? Or did you like were you comfortable right away of I know who I am, I feel good about myself or what I believe in? Not to get crazy philosophical and
I
all
mean,
this,
I mean,
but
honestly, not really. I mean, that was a challenging. I mean, looking back, that was probably one of the more. I mean, things were never like that bad. Don't get me wrong, but like
yeah.
it was also it. There was like a all right, like we have this weird window in my 20s of I'm done with playing college basketball and I'm working in a job that I don't really like and like I don't know how to fill up the rest of my time. And so I mean, honestly, coaching has been like one of the best things for me, because it was the only thing I ever did. I always laugh. I say this a lot, but like, I don't know what else I would do in the winter if I wasn't in a gym. Like, I don't know. You're in Illinois, it's freezing cold. And I'm like, I have always been in a gym playing basketball. And fortunately, now I'm always in the gym coaching basketball. And so, like, that really has helped me, truthfully. And so I think that is something that really did help me kind of like
feel like, all right, I'm actually giving something back and I actually have a purpose when I wake up in the morning. And my high school team has not been good. And that's, I suppose, well documented. Um, but like it, it does give me a sense of purpose. Like, all right, I'm going to figure this thing out. Just kind of like it's the same stretching and clawing you're doing when you're trying to get minutes in a basketball game, right? Like, it's like I'm going to work hard to sort this out, to figure this out, and that's how I kind of feel with my coaching right now. It's like, yeah, we haven't been good, but like I'm gonna give my all to try to make it a situation that's better than when I started. And I think that sense of purpose has been like exceptional for me.
Did you feel it right away when you decided to leave the corporate side? Like, did you actually feel that kind of self coming back and that purpose coming back right away, or did it still take a little bit of lag time? Because I feel like people think it's instantaneous of like, this is it, this is my passion, this is what I need to be doing, and I don't think it's that way. But curious to hear
Well,
yours.
I don't know. I think it's kind of a combo. I don't think it was like there was like a moment where I was like, I'm back. But I was like I definitely felt like more like myself, I think, as soon as I started teaching. Um the profession is totally different than, I mean, there's its challenges too. Every job has its challenges. But it just felt a lot more dynamic. And I mean, you're constantly interacting with students or colleagues and stuff like that. That, not to say that the people at Aon weren't really intelligent or dynamic themselves, but just the nature of the job, there wasn't as much interaction. I mean, there's days where, I mean, you're locked in on a computer screen for 7 and 8 hours there, and that just wasn't me. And so, was it instantaneous? I don't know about instantaneous, but it happened pretty quickly where I was like, okay, this suits me a lot better.
That makes sense. And what do you think was more of the calling? Was it getting back on the court as a coach, or do you think it was getting in the classroom? Was one more motivator than the other?
Um, huh, probably. eh, I'll be honest, early on, maybe being a coach was probably what drew me to education a little bit more. But as I've been in the classroom more, I also, I guess, feel a lot of gratification from doing that as well. And so, eh, yeah, it's funny because you always say I'm a teacher first, but I think a lot of times if you talk to a lot of high school teachers, like, yeah, they say they're a teacher first, but in a lot of ways, like, they're a coach first that is teaching because it gives them the opportunity to coach and also, earn a living wage and not do the whole college thing where you're constantly on the road and stuff. And so uh, that's a really good question. And I don't know if I have a great answer. To some extent, I think it was probably coaching is what drew me towards education, but like, it's one and the same, right? Like, when you're teaching, you're coaching. When you're coaching, you're teaching. And so, there's a lot of crossover between those two things, and how you treat your athletes or how you treat your students, and establishing like a culture of the classroom or a culture of a program. It's really not that dissimilar. So I think it's probably more similar than we lead on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What subject do you teach, and like ages and everything?
Yeah. Yeah. So I teach high school. So I have literally freshmen from freshmen to seniors, in various different classes. I teach business courses. So I teach like an entrepreneurship course. I teach a management course, and I teach like a intro to business course is essentially what it is for freshmen. So, um, I've really enjoyed that. Obviously for me, it's probably a little more theoretical because it's like, all right, you're an entrepreneur teacher. It's like, what have you made? What business have you started? And it's like, that's a fair question. I haven't. So that's something that you have to give and take with the students. But eh, I would imagine there's not too many business teachers that have been successful entrepreneurs unless it's maybe like a college class or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
that
still been waiting on my invite. He says it all the time to
We'll
be a
get you.
guest speaker. He always says he's going to bring
We'll,
me in as a guest speaker, and
we'll
just
get you.
I never hear from him.
Maybe when you come up. Maybe when you come up.
I'll change my flights if you need me to. I'll hop in.
That's
it's not
ridiculous.
buddy weekend will be perfect timing.
We'll bring
That's right.
we'll bring both of you guys in.
If that's what gets Banko back on the trip, that's fine by me.
Yeah, that was disappointing to lose him.
we'll make it back. I forget what stopped me. I think
The
it was the
wedding.
move to Nashville. Which wedding? Oh
Bradley's.
yeah. The wedding. Yeah, that's what happened. Oh, okay. Now we're back.
That kind of backfired. But then you left the group chat, so that's on you.
Yeah, the following year. It was the wedding, then the move.
Well, we'll scrub it. Get him the dates and see if he can make some magic happen.
Yeah, I'll work on it. He's trying to convince me to go to Mexico right now, and I just can't. Well, I originally said I wanted to go to Mexico, but it just didn't work out timing wise. So Wisconsin/Chicago might be a decent runner up.
There you
We
go.
can still do we can still do Mexico on another weekend as well, but
We'll figure
we
it
got
out.
time. We got time. But yeah, send me the dates.
I'll let you guys sort it out.
Yes. Well, Brad, this will be a decent pivot to a different topic before we come back to kind of this serious school talk.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do actually think is pretty admirable that you have taken on is kind of being captain of friend groups to a certain extent. Is you do a good job wrangling people together and keeping people in touch. And as we age, that is a lot more difficult to do.
Yeah.
Did that come from anywhere? Did you witness? I'm highly doubting your father did any of that.
Yeah. Oh no,
I know
my
he
dad
does have
actually.
golf
I'll be
buddies.
honest. I'll be honest. My dad actually does do a really good job of that. Like he's still. I mean, my grandpa ran a golf outing for many, many, many years, and my dad's kind of taking the reins on that. And he does a really good job of that. Just like making sure he gets to see his friends like a few times a year. So I would say to some extent, I don't know if I'd learned that from him, but like he does do a good job. I would say of that. And you know, it's if I'm being totally transparent, it's in ways it's frustrating because it's like, all right, like it'd be cool if somebody else reached out and was like, hey, like, do you guys want to do stuff? It's like kind of me always is the driver of things, especially locally. Not as much like when people are in different states and stuff. Like obviously, logistically, that's very challenging. But like, I think my thing has always been like, as frustrating as it is, like I think I'd rather see my friends and just make the effort than not make the effort and chance the fact that like we won't hang out anymore, if that makes sense. So especially with now with this golf outing that we've done, which I think is in year 6 or 7, it's weird to say like it's important to me, but like it is important to me. And so it's really cool when we all get up here once a year at least to see each other. And obviously things change. People, you know, start having children, and I'm sure there will be a day that will come for me as well where it would be more challenging. But just like doing it in some capacity, whether it's just a day or a few days, is something that is important to me. So I always figure I'd rather just make the effort and have that happen. So and as far as setting up the fantasy league goes, the only reason I do that is because I just really want to win it one year, and then I think I'll care less about it. So,
but adding on to that, even beyond the fantasy football and the golf, even when we were at school, I know you were in charge of kangaroo court for the basketball team, or little activities like that.
Yeah.
You've kind of always been a ringleader in that regard. I'm sure there are some loose connections between your ability to do that and your love of teaching, coaching, just being able to pull strings and keep people together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a leadership role in general. I mean, that's kind of the leadership role I had in my high school teams as well. And so I think it's just something that was kind of what I've always done and kind of kept doing that, I suppose. I don't really think about it though. Like I don't actively think about like, man, I'm keeping everybody together. Like that's not like what I'm saying to myself. It's just like I haven't seen these guys in a while. Like it'd be super cool if they can all get up here. And like I'm genuinely, I'm not angry, but I'm genuinely like disappointed when like there's certain guys that can't make it. And even if it's not, it's not their fault necessarily, right? Like it's not Cobb's fault. Well, it kind of is Cobb's fault. He had his baby, but it's not. You can't totally blame him on him. But like it does suck when he can't make it up here. If like works or like Ray's got to work more and like he can't make it, it's like that sucks. But it's just more of a disappointment thing. If Banko can't make it because he, you know, exits the group, that kind of sucks.
Just throw me under the bus to peer pressure me into coming this time. Damn.
There you go.
I was gonna go to the frustration, and you brought up Cobb anyway. So, any specific things that stick out that have been very frustrating over the years?
As far as like with the group,
Yeah, of like you organizing things.
I don't know if there's been anything that's well, yeah. I mean, there is always frustrations because people's like schedule changes. Like one thing that does frustrate me, I'll give you this is like people that like just don't respond. It's like, all right, you're in, you're out, fine. Like that's totally cool. Will I be a little disappointed? Yeah, but like if you just like don't answer, that gets me frustrated because it's like we're trying to put this together, like, and you're just like not responding, and it's like then it becomes very challenging to do anything and set stuff up. And so that's one thing that does frustrate me. As far as other things that just like funny occurrences that had happened. The year after we graduated from Eckerd, I was working at Aon, and we were trying to get me, Ray, and Kevin Walsh together, and like we hadn't seen each other for like probably half a year or whatever. And so we could not get Cobb to commit. Like he was not coming. He's like, I'm not coming up there. Like it's gonna be cold, whatever. It's like in March. And so we just Ray and I were like, screw this. So we just bought the plane ticket for him. So we just were like, we totally guilted him to doing it. It was like we Ray and I spent it like, I mean, flights were cheap back then, so we probably spent like $75 each. And we're like, you're coming. The ticket's already bought. And so I ended up coming up. So that was like kind of the cool thing of us setting things up. But I mean, as far as frustrations go, I don't know. I don't know if there's been like too many frustrations other than just people being people. So
Yeah.
Was that flight to Midway?
oh man, I don't know. I would like to think we booked it to O'Hare. It's actually I was cracking up though because Adam, the last time you called, which I never got back to you on,
Yep.
but I was going on. We were going on a cruise, and we had to
Yeah,
fly.
totally, man.
Yeah, we had to fly from Chicago to Miami, and we had to fly out of Midway. So I was cracking up for calling me, and I was at Midway. I was like, I can't answer the phone call. I can't tell him where I'm at.
No, that's the
Gonna
number
ruin the
one
brand.
taboo move.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the only illegal move during Buddy Weekend is going to Midway, unless you want to handle all your own transit.
Yeah, well, midnight or Midway on like a weekday is tough. So
yeah, but now we'll go back to the serious stuff, which I think Banko might have provided a decent segue for us talking about frustrations. I'm assuming that's a very similar frustration now in a coaching / organizational role is you're dealing with female athletes from the ages of 14 to 18. I'm sure communication can be difficult or connecting to the student athletes specifically in the basketball team.
Yeah.
How do you handle that communication process with a bunch of 14 to 18-year-old girls?
Yeah. So a lot of people would kind of brought up the gender thing to me prior to getting the job, and I very, very seldomly even thought about it until I took a assistant coaching job with my cousin the year prior to me getting the head coaching job. I was like in between Aon and doing grad school and student teaching, so I coached with him for that year. And it's funny because like I don't know, I don't think I coached them that differently than the guys. Which everybody says like they're totally different. You need to coach them different. Like they're gonna be a wreck. They're gonna be crying all the time. Like, yeah, that stuff does pop up, but like honestly, I wouldn't be that surprised if a high school boy was crying at some points like this time. And so it's not something that like I really like Gino Oriema, the UConn coach, and not to say I don't try to like model myself after any coach. Like I think that's totally ludicrous that you'd be like, yeah, Bobby Knight, I'm going to be like Bobby Knight. It's like, well, you're not Bobby Knight, so don't act like Bobby Knight. Like you are who you are. But like one thing he did say, he's like, they asked him that same question. He's like, I just coach them like the same way I would coach the guys. And so that's kind of how I approach that with the girls. And I mean, I think we all have shortcomings with communication, and I think there's always situations that come up that you can probably handle a little bit differently. But I think that's a pretty case by case basis. I don't know if it's because I'm coaching the high school girls or if I would have the same miscommunications if I was coaching high school boys. And so, I don't think it's like been anything where like I have to communicate totally different with the high school girls than I do if it was boys. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Um,
Yeah, I think it does. I think even beyond just the gender difference, another thing that I was kind of curious about even is how you have seen trends in communication change
Yeah,
from when you started this position 6 years ago
yeah,
versus now. If the way
yeah,
you have to communicate change it has changed, or I know the prevalence of cell phones or social
yep,
media or all these different things that run the lives of
yeah.
the high school population. Has that shifted
Yeah.
your communication style or just the communication that you have face to face?
Yeah, so I always say that like we grew up in a really cool time just because we had cell phones, we had like enough technology, but it like wasn't the ease of access to like be able to text people all the time, as much as it is now, or like have Snapchat, which is how they mostly communicate now. Um, I remember like distinctly having to explain to my parents like what a text message was when we were in probably like middle school. Like, yeah, no, it's a message you send to them. And they're like, I remember my dad being like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why don't you just call them? And it's like that was what they thought then. And obviously that changed significantly, but like still texting was not like as prevalent. Technology was not as prevalent in our academic settings as it currently is. I don't know what your rules were in high school, but like it was like a big deal if our cell phone went off in class. It like the cell phone was supposed to be in your locker and even more funny, like turned off in your locker. Like so you might as well not even have brought it to school. And obviously that has shifted significantly. But I think we're actually at a point just from my perspective of being in the classes of the pendulum, I think is swinging back to them actually trying to come up with alternatives to having cell phones in the class. Like I think it's going to be in the next 5 years. I think we're going to be more close to cell phones are away, and they're not out in the classroom because we've started to see the effects for a lot of these kids from a communication standpoint. And it's just they can just hide in their phones so much easier than we could probably, and it's not even necessarily the way you communicate with them; it's the way they communicate back with you. Like they're just not as confident with it because they're not used to speaking to a human. They're used to sending a text message or sending a Snapchat message, and they don't have to rely on like their own verbal communication or their own like formal academic communication. So
What are the rules now for cell phones? Are they allowed to be on and out in schools now? Is that a thing?
so when I got to my original position, like 6 years ago, I guess now, like there really wasn't like a strong cell phone rule. It was kind of just like tell them to put it away, and it's like, well, you can imagine how big of a challenge that is for a high school teacher with 30 students, and your only thing that you can do is tell them to put away. I mean, it's like you'd battle that the entire class period. Like you'd look to your left and tell a kid to put it away, look to your right, tell a kid to put it away, then have to look back to the left, tell the same kid to put it away. And it's like you would spend, I mean, truthfully, you would spend probably 30 minutes of your academic time if that's the decision you made to like really be rigid with your cell phone policy. So without a backbone there, that was a big time challenge. Your other option was just like, there's going to be a handful of students that are here to learn. And so I'm going to teach those kids kind of more like a college setting, right? Like you could be on your laptop if you want in a college setting, and the professor is very rarely going to say anything. It's like you need to know the content or you don't know the content. Then we started to go to rules where it's like it's pretty easy to submit through a Google form. It's like a warning and then another warning, and then they actually will come and take the cell phone. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. But other schools within our district, they're going to like I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, like they have to put it in something prior to class and they can get it
Mhm.
after class. So that's the path they're going. I truthfully think like next few years it's going to be like you can't have your cell phones, and actually some of the districts in Illinois have gone to that, so that's kind of cool to see, and I think that's really going to help out in the classroom. So and it does impact them from a communication standpoint. They're not as confident speaking to adults or their classmates even because they don't have to do that.
So do you structure then a lot of public speaking or presentations in your class because you're kind of very
Yeah,
connected to it and working in the business world? you
Yeah.
do have to loosely prepare these students to
I,
take on a business role at some point.
yeah, I suppose that's kind of class by class. Like my freshman classes, that's more like it's a combination between like some business topics, but also like a lot of financial literacy topics. It'd be pretty difficult to like have them presenting about some of the financial literacy topics that are out there. Like, it's like, what are they going to do? Like a presentation on like tax code or something like that. So that like is initially a class that would fit that, but like my business management class and my we call it the business incubator program, but the entrepreneurship class, the answer is yes. In fact, like we're a week in and we've already had kids do a presentation, like get up in front of the class, because in my entrepreneurship one, it's like if you can't present, you're really going to struggle in the class, because you have to get up and not only present in front of your class, but you have to present in front of prospective investors and adults. And so if they're not able to do that, that's going to be a long year for them. So I try to get them up in front of the class, and I tell them, I mean, I'm very honest with them that like, you're going to have to do presentations in this class. So you better get used to it pretty much. So, and we lose kids because of that. Like we'll have kids that drop the class because of that, but it's like, that's probably the better option in the first week of school than trying to do this. And it's not going to work. And then you're not going to get as good of a grade.
So are they creating business plans in that class?
So we use something called a business model canvas, a BMC. It's like a 1-page business plan. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. It's based on a book called The Lean Startup. It's just trying to like, what's that? All right, I'll talk to you in a little bit. I'm working on this. Yes, I'm close. Drew just popped in.
Hey, Drew.
Hey, Joe.
Drew, you want to join the podcast?
She's like, are you almost done talking to this guy? I was like, what are you saying? You might have to edit this one, Banko.
I'll cut this out. That's fine. We might keep it in. Why not?
Yeah. Anyways, that's hilarious. What was I saying? Oh yeah, with BMC, it's based on a lean method, which is like a 1-page business plan. And the intent of it was to take the amount of time that you would spend doing a formal business plan and just get it on one page, and then getting a prototype to market as quickly as possible to start collecting customer feedback. So instead of putting together a formal, 50-page business plan, to just start testing the market as quick as possible by building out a prototype, which is kind of a cool concept. So that's kind of the basis of the class. And so they come up with a business, and then we give them funds after they do a presentation to create a prototype. And then they're supposed to, with that prototype, I mean, technically it's not always a prototype because it could be a service or something, but they're actually supposed to market test. So they actually need to get like feedback from prospective customers and go out of the community and ask questions. And then pretty much at the end of the year, it's like, all right, what'd you learn? Like, what did you learn from your prototype? Did you make any more iterations, et cetera? And then we pick one of those groups to pitch in front of the district, and then they can win money. So to run their own business. So the district is giving away like between $15,000 and $25,000 a year for the last 5 or probably 10 years or so. So it's only my 4th year doing it though. So
Do you have any students that have pursued it business wise?
So that's kind of always okay. So in the district, there has been a few that have won, that have continued to pursue it. But I would not say that's the norm. There's so many things pulling these kids with like, I mean, it's pretty hard to say like, hey, mom and dad, like, thanks for everything with the high school. I have this, project I did in my business incubator class, so I'm going to forgo going to college. Mom and dad are probably not going to be super jacked about that, or they're just like, I'd rather just go to college. And so we've bounced a lot of ideas back and forth with each other about like maybe turning into a scholarship or something rather than just like capital for their business, because I mean, it's a huge undertaking to start and try to run your own business, obviously. I mean, and these kids are high school students. So
I think that I personally feel as if the theory of the class is the most important thing. I do think it's cool that there is some award at the end. I just don't know if like the funding their business is like the appropriate one, or maybe there should be an option for a scholarship or something like that.
Yeah, that's probably a way more fungible, tangible route for them.
Yeah.
Because you're spot on. An 18-year-old isn't going to think, oh, this is it. This is my
Yeah.
life now. I'm going to go
Yeah.
sell these rubber
Yeah.
bands, these
Yeah.
redesigned rubber bands that I created for the rest of my
Yeah.
life. Also, $15,000 to $25,000 is freaking awesome for a
Yeah.
startup business from a district, just
Yeah.
from a school project. But in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of the business world, that doesn't get you very
Yeah.
far at all.
It erodes pretty quickly. For sure.
Extremely quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had, there was one group in the district that didn't actually win the money and continued on with their idea. And they're still a business. It's like a deodorizer for like athletic bags and even lockers and stuff like that. It's called Deal Block. So we've had those guys come in, but that's pretty few and far in between, to be completely honest. Like there's not, I mean, a lot of the groups just kind of fold after high school ends. And I mean, I don't blame them for that. I mean, there's so many things pulling them at that time in their lives. Like it'd be pretty hard to make a commitment to a business.
100%.
What are some of the other unique business plans that you've seen? Not necessarily that have won or that good, but just like I've been in those classes and some people come up with some creative ideas.
Yeah, man, I don't know if I have anything. I don't know if I have anything that's like individually that I would share. I would just say like you get a lot of the recycled ideas because it's funny because you're like taking a group of people that is like the exact same age, and then you're asking them to like think about problems they have on a daily basis and solve those problems because that's, I mean, that's what entrepreneurship is, right? Like solving a problem. But all their perspectives are like, it's not like a college course where they could come from like distinctly different backgrounds and then like they're all put together and it's like, all right, come up with an idea. It's like, no, these kids all live in the same community, are all pretty much the same age, etc. So it's like you just get a lot of like recycled ideas over and over again. And it's like, no, we tried that one last year. Here are the pitfalls. And I have to be careful with projecting that on them because I mean, I want to be open minded, but like, there's also times they'll come up with a concept, and I'm like, that's never going to work. Like, I can give you a million reasons right now that's going to fail, or like, yeah, it's a problem, but it's not worth solving, and like, and that happens too. Like, they'll come up with a problem, and it's like, yeah, but can you solve that and then monetize it? Are people going to pay for it? And so like, that's a challenge for me, just like trying to stay open minded when there's ideas that I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be an awesome idea. So,
Have there been any times in this? I know you mentioned earlier that it hasn't really come up. You haven't yourself necessarily gone down the entrepreneurial path.
yeah.
Have there been any cases where students have been really passionate about their projects and then they have projected onto you of
Yeah.
maybe a lack of experience?
Um, that's funny. Um, I would say no, but I would say there's students that are out there, whether it's that class or not, that are fully in tune with things and are like, yeah, you can't necessarily like lead me down the path that I need to go. Like I'm really passionate about this, and I'm honest with them. Like that's one thing that is important to me. Like I don't tell them I'm like an entrepreneur. Like I'm teaching you the theory of entrepreneurship. Like and here's what like the literature says on it, and like here's me trying to help you. But if you are super passionate about an idea, even if I tell you it's a stupid idea, which I would obviously never say it in that way, but it's like you can still pursue this in other avenues. It doesn't have to be just in my classroom. In fact, a good entrepreneur is probably not only going to pursue it within a high school classroom. So I don't know if anybody's made me like feel inferior or being like, yeah, you don't know what you're doing because of that. But like they'll ask, high school students are definitely in tune with that and will definitely ask you like, well, what have you made? And it's like, yeah, good point. Like I get you on that. So it's like you can listen to me or not listen to me, but like you still have to pass this class.
So I feel like in some parts you just have to be a guider of creativity. Just
Yes.
like you said, kind of point out pitfalls or maybe where hiccups might occur
Right.
and just kind of play hands off to be like, hey, this is what it looks like from a literature standpoint and
Yeah.
what previous experience would show. It might
Yes.
not be my experience, but this is what the industry shows. And if
Yeah.
you want to go that route, great. But
Yeah.
you're probably going to have to go about it in a different way than all of these people have.
And that's exactly what I say. And also, like I mentioned with like recycling of ideas, I do have some background of like, okay, this group did something very similar last year, and this is what they ran into. So unless you have an idea that you can get around those obstacles, I'm telling you it's going to be challenging, and you're probably going to beat your head against a wall for this entire year if you go with this plan. But I don't tell them like, no, you don't have to do I never say like, but you have to stop. Like if that's your choice, that's your choice. I'm just saying you're going to probably meet some obstacles and challenges. So
Going back to the communication with high school kids, how involved are the parents both in the classroom side of things and also on the basketball coaching side of things, and how much communication is done with the parents as well?
um I think you're going to probably be surprised with this. I very seldomly, I'm knocking on wood here. I very seldomly have um, had many issues in my classroom with parents, like as far as like communication goes or anything like that. Basketball, I mean, things pop up every now and again. I am trying to say this delicately. I've not been in a area or community as far as basketball goes where there has been a ton of parent involvement in the past, which in ways is detrimental to our program, but in ways is helpful in the sense that like I don't have a ton of um, people looking over my shoulder, I guess, and so I know other programs constantly deal with that stuff, but it's just something that I really haven't had to do too much. I will say I have a lot of parent involvement with like my younger groups, like my feeder programs, and I've been very proactive at those levels. But that's me more so reaching out to them to try to get them more involved, because I think that is helpful. Um, but yeah, no, I there hasn't been like a ton of like parent interference, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily going the issues route because you do have
Oh, okay.
just some parents that really do care a lot and they are
Yeah.
very involved,
Yeah.
and it can get to an extent where it becomes an issue. But there's
Yeah.
definitely, I don't want to say hovering parents, but it's kind of that term of like
Yeah.
they're always there, they're always involved, they're always want to know what's going on, and they don't let the kid communicate sometimes. So like there's a balance there.
Yeah.
Snowplow parents. That's what I've heard them get called these days. They're always trying to create the path
Oh,
for their kids instead of where I feel like our age, the problem parents were more the hoverers or helicopter. They were always trying to just watch what was going on. From what I have witnessed Corey deal with the SCAD students, is a lot of it can be snowplow, where they're just trying to create paths. The kid literally just walks this beautiful path behind their parent and never has to deal with any problems because the parent's handling everything.
Yeah. And that's obviously not a productive route. I mean, it's a productive route maybe for results for the kid, but it's not a productive lesson for the kid either. And that's going to catch up to them at some point. Like I always think athletically how funny it is because it's like you're going to get to college and it's like dad can't just call on your behalf anymore. Like he can't just call coach and be like, why isn't my son playing or whatever. I mean, he can, but generally that doesn't go over super well with the head coach.
Not at all.
Yeah. So,
I have a pivoting question, Banko. I don't know if you have any more on this specific topic.
no, go ahead.
All right, Brad, going back to your individual life now, as we mentioned ahead of time, one of the things we like to talk about is kind of figuring out people's habits or different things in their life that make them feel successful or accomplished. So, what is the daily routine for you, whether it's working out, golf, different things that make you feel sane or help you feel sane
yeah.
every single day?
So it's funny because I've been in a really good rhythm lately, I would say. I've probably gotten better at my routine every year I've taught, and I think that's probably just you get better at your job as you do it longer. So I think I mean, I still change things. I still try to adapt my teaching, but I don't feel as if I spend as much brain power um, planning my classes as I've had to do in the past, which I think kind of frees me up in other regards. In other words, and it's just a time standpoint. It's like your first year teaching, you're spending a lot of time like planning what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. But as you do it for your fifth or sixth year, you have at least a template to kind of what you're going to do, and then you just kind of tinker with that stuff. And because of that, I just feel like my routine has changed where like now I have the time to make sure like all right, I'm gonna get a good workout in every day. And that hasn't always necessarily been the case even with teaching or whether I was at Aon. And so that's obviously something on a day-to-day or like a daily basis that is part of my routine, and I think that's probably the thing that keeps me the most sane. And I think you guys would both agree with that, but I think that's just us growing up in athletics as well. So I mean, I don't know if I have a typical day, and things do shift a little bit, but my schedule is also just excellent because when I was working in a corporate position, you're finishing work at 6 o'clock and you might be there at 8:15. From a teaching perspective, I mean, my morning starts at uh, I mean, it starts a little earlier than a typical corporate job, but like I'm at work around 6:45 or 7, and then I work till about 2:45, and then after that, depending on the time of the year, whether it's basketball season or not, there's a lot of hours that I can do things with, and whether that's work out or go play around a golf or get things done, that has been great, and that's just an opening of time that I never had. And now, especially because I'm so much better planned for the year, I have even more time. I have even more brain power that I can do things that I like to do. And so, as far as like do I have a laid out habit every day? I wake up and I eat this and I drink this and stuff like that. I would say no, but I just have the time to kind of like make my day what I want to make my day. So that's been super helpful.
Awesome. And then uh, with your wife also being educator and coach,
Yeah.
are you all on similar schedules or?
That's the one thing that is weird because she coaches the boys and the girls volleyball program at her high school, which is close, and then I coach basketball. So we are the only time we're like fully around is the summer. But like so she's coaching the fall, then I coach the winter, then she coaches in the spring. So I mean like we definitely throughout the school year we definitely stay busy. Um, I personally, I mean, she's doing two sports, so her gig is probably a few weeks longer than mine. At least the basketball is the longest season. But so our schedules don't align perfectly with that. But I think we're both pretty active. Like I think, at least for me, and she'll say the same thing for the most part. It's like I do like to have like a level of busyness where I feel like I'm doing something purposefully. Like I don't think I would want to be in a situation where my day would finish at 2:45 and then it's like I have nothing to do from 2:45 to like 10 p.m. or whatever. I think it's nice to have like every now and again, but I just don't think like that's how I would want my life to be. Like I don't think I would want 2:45 to 10 p.m. every night with like nothing planned around the agenda. So yeah, it's hard because our schedules are different. So like there are times a year we don't see a lot of each other. But I always say like we get the full summer together. So
Do you guys work to intentionally make time together, or do you just trust that it'll work out because you live under the same roof and you have an entire summer?
um, I think we probably would give you two different answers with this. I think she would say that she'd like me to work like intentionally give her more time. Like that's probably why she walked in the door and asked me if I was done yet. And then I think, and which might be a bad thing, I probably am like, listen, we're gonna be together all summer. So like
And
yeah,
for a lot of years.
yeah. So I don't know. I think our answers, I mean, that's maybe one of our points of contention with each other. So we'll sort that out.
but I know I'm gonna walk off this call and she's gonna be like, "What were you doing in there? Like we were supposed to be hanging out." So
I think it's a good point you brought up, I guess, from people that didn't play college sports is realizing how much free time you have once you get in. Like that was a hard thing for me.
yeah,
Even I mean, I got off at like 4:30 or 5 when I first, but like then I had nothing to do for
yeah,
5, 6 hours a day, and it was like, what do I do with my time?
yeah.
So that definitely was a struggle. I'm gonna bring it back to, and I just thought of this because you brought it up in the teaching world, going corporate America, you're working 12 months a year, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. There's
Yep.
not a lot of thought process around money
No.
and budgeting because you're always getting that cash flow. But for teachers, especially, you get 3 months where it's not there basically. So there is definitely a planning piece. Did you struggle with that going switching
Uh,
over?
all right. So I don't know how it is in other states, but we get paid, and the districts are different. I shouldn't even say state. Every district's different. Some people in teaching do get paid like for all 12 months. Like they get paychecks every 2 weeks in the summer included. We do not get paid that way. We get paid just like the coolest day of the year, but you're also like, all right, I gotta make this last. The last day of school, we get 6 paychecks. So, and we get a lump sum into our account. So you're like walking out of there and you're like yeah. And but you're like, I also got to budget this. So that's how we get paid. I don't know how they get paid in other states. I don't know if like they don't get paid. I mean, it kind of seems like based on their salaries, they almost don't get paid for the summer, but like we get paid for the full year, if that makes sense.
But there's still a 3 month like you get it's basically you get a bonus at the last day of school, and then you got to
Correct.
make that bonus last for three
Yes.
months. Did you
Yes.
struggle with that initially? Like the first
Well,
summer, was it harder?
yeah, I mean,
A little
I think
bit.
I do a pretty solid job of budgeting for like just to have a security net, as well as like putting a lot of money for away for retirement. Like we do a good job of that. Like we max out pretty much everything we can. Um, we have, for lack of a better term, we have balled out the last 2 summers because like we've gone to Europe for the last 3 summers actually. Like we were in Portugal, and then we did our honeymoon, and then this year the camp schedule worked out really good for the summer, so we went to Europe again. So we've probably we've probably spent more money than we would in a traditional summer if we didn't like go anywhere. But I always look at it like it's a great opportunity to go somewhere. We're pretty young. We don't have any kids yet. Like this could be our last opportunity for a long time to go to Europe or to travel. So that is definitely something that is one of our priorities. I don't know what I would do for an entire summer if like I didn't go somewhere and travel, whether that's domestically or a European trip. But that's something that is very important now from a budgeting standpoint. I mean, that definitely takes a toll on the bank account. But it's just something that's so prioritized for us that that's something we're willing to do.
Were you always like, did you start like right when you started working, were you good at that budgeting and saving, or was it something? Because it depends on the person. Like I initially was very good that way, and I think it
Yeah,
was just because my parents kind of taught it
yeah,
to me. But I
yeah,
know some people struggle for a couple years to figure out like the
yeah.
retirement savings on all
Which
that
is a shame.
budgeting.
Which is a shame. And my parents probably instilled the same thing that your parents instilled in you. I mean, it was always like, I mean, I set up my 401k immediately at getting it on. I set up my 403. It's a 403b for public employees. So I set up my 403b and pretty much maxed it out immediately when I was teaching. I have an HSA account as well for healthcare, and that's maxed. And then, IRAs. Like I have always felt it important to a budget for those things specifically. Like I think that's the quicker you can get into that habit and then just like not think about that money leaving your paycheck because it's already in those accounts. I mean, it's not like I'm coming up with this theory. It's like that's the truth. Like it's not as painful when that money is just immediately going in those accounts. So like I don't even think about that money. I'm like, yeah, I know that's going in there, and then I just check the accounts. It's not as if I have to like take that money in cash and then go put it into those accounts, which obviously hurts more. So I don't know. I've been pretty lucky. Just that's always kind of been my mentality. But that's probably because my parents probably instilled that in me, I suppose.
It's a good mentality to have when you're also teaching it, because I would say from a financial
Yeah.
literacy standpoint, that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I think business teachers probably have a little bit stronger of a feel. I would not say all my colleagues in the building. I mean, I'm sure there's some teachers in the building that don't know what a 403B is, and that's a shame. I mean, it's gonna adversely affect them as they get older and they get closer to retirement. I mean, truthfully, I mean, even it's crazy because even if you miss doing it for a year or two, like how much that really sets you back.
Hmm. Yeah, and I have another path to go down here, Banko. I don't know if you want to stick on this financial.
I got two
No,
percent. Whatever topics we're covering, let's go.
Okay.
Let's go, Adam.
I want to go. I want to go back to the sports days and talk about the transition. I know you said your heart just wasn't in soccer, and that's why
Yeah.
you went the basketball route eventually.
Yeah.
I want to know if you put in work for soccer like you put in for basketball, because soccer you excelled tremendously. You obviously were at a nationally recognized program at the Division 1 level. Then you come to basketball, which I know is your love, but in the grand scheme of things, skill wise, you didn't stack up quite as high, transitioning to a D2 program, an extremely good D2 program, but the levels are just different.
Yeah.
So was that also a struggle for you, looking at ability versus love?
Um, I the soccer thing kind of just happened. If I'm being completely honest, it was not like I mean I always played club. I always grew up playing soccer, but it was never truly a passion of mine. And then it just kind of like felt like, oh great, I have this opportunity to play Division 1 sport. Like let's go play this Division 1 sport. And got there and just felt like it wasn't for me. And that was probably the first time it was really challenging though too, because now I'm competing against, you know, three other guys, four other guys are like collegiate goalkeepers that are real deal, that is their number one passion. And so that was challenging. Not to say I didn't work hard while I was at USC, it just probably wasn't what I wanted to do. And then just going to Eckerd, I mean, Eckerd always felt like something that would challenge me, which is something I have always liked in my life. Like that's what's helped me through a lot of things. Like I like a challenge. I don't want to run from a challenge. So that's kind of what Eckerd felt like. And I don't know if it was like we might all disagree with this commentary, but like Eckerd to me wasn't a it wasn't like I didn't feel like my skills were deficient to play at Eckerd. I felt as if athletically, that's where I started to kind of tap out, where athletically I struggled in comparison to the other guys that were on the courts. And a lot of that is just in basketball. That's just what you run into. Like it's like that's why you don't see a lot of 6'1" guards playing high level Division 1 basketball or college basketball, or excuse me, you're playing in the NBA and things like that. It's because you run into the point where it's like, all right, yeah, I might have similar skills to these guys, but like I can't like I'm not as quick as them and I'm not as athletic as them. I don't have the same size as them. But I was always one that was like really did.
Yep.
Yep,
There we have it. What a finish to the interview with Brad.
Perfect.
We'll talk it out a little bit. So for those who might not have caught it, Brad said that he had 2% of battery left once we entered that question about his soccer basketball pursuits. So, Banko, would you like to continue the answer as Brad and make it up for us, or do you just want to talk out the end of this podcast?
I mean, I'll just finish the statement. I think the point he was getting at is it was the realization, like his realization of I am not going to the next level of basketball was when he got to Eckerd and realizing height matters, speed matters, and the skill level to get to the next level. And I think all athletes get to that point at different points in time, just like we've discussed in the past. And it just depends on that time. And sometimes it's because you realize you're not good enough. But like for myself, growing up in Florida and seeing some younger kids that were very talented comparatively to me, I realized I was never going to get there. So I think I realized it earlier than a lot of athletes that I should just enjoy the time in college, where a lot of athletes, it takes college, sometimes independent ball in the baseball world, sometimes like they never get there. So it's just a good perspective to have.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to bring up kind of on that, there is a basketball slash public figure that I know Brad really likes. I don't know if you know the name. He's at Barstool now, weirdly enough, but his name's Mark Titus. He was a walk-on basketball player at Ohio State. He started his own brand called Club Trillion. His story's really cool. He's a published author. He has really good stuff, but he was an Indiana high school basketball star, and he ended up at Ohio State because he was on the same AAU team as Greg Oden and Mike Conley Jr. So he was just the token guy that could stand in the corner and shoot, and he was best buddies with those dudes. So the Ohio State coach was like, "Yeah, come on, you're gonna make great grades. We're never gonna worry about you." But he talked about on an entertainment-based podcast. I haven't read his book. I really want to. It's on my list. But on an entertainment-based podcast, they had kind of a discussion like we try to have, very pointed, very deep. And they were just talking about when they realized they weren't going to make it. And he said in seventh or eighth grade, he was 6'4". Then his ninth grade year, he was 6'4" again. 10th grade, he was 6'4". In his junior year, he was 6'4". In his junior year, he was probably all state in Indiana, considered to be one of the best basketball players everywhere that he went. But when he spent his fifth straight year at 6'4", and his skill didn't really change. He was still extremely skilled, but he just athletically hit a ceiling, and he saw all the guys around him who still, a few of his high school teammates play in the NBA still. He just knew it was over, and that's when he really struggled with his identity. And for some reason, I feel like it hits in basketball a little bit differently. And maybe it is because the sport isn't always a skill limitation sport. It really is an athletic limitation sport.
Yeah, I mean, I have no perspective on basketball, but I feel like the height does matter significantly more, and it's a lot more obvious than other sports such as soccer, baseball, golf, where it is more of a skill set type of sport,
Yeah.
which you always think you can improve, but there is a ceiling. Even if people say there isn't a ceiling to skill set, there is a ceiling. I don't know how to find that, but there's no data point to point to that I can think of for some of the skills. But there's definitely a skill set there. And I mean, as you were telling that story, it reminded me of I don't know his name. He was a kicker for UCF before NIL deals were a thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and he had a YouTube channel, and he was starting to make money because he monetized the channel. And the NCAA said, you either shut down the channel or you're done as a college athlete because you can't be paid. And he decided to take the route of YouTube because he realized, I'm not going to make money in this sport long term, so I'm going to go that route. And ultimately, it worked out for him, and it was a good decision. And he's been a big supporter of the NIL deals. But it's interesting to hear those stories of all different athletes on the timing of like, I'm not I'm not there, like, and when that happens.
Yeah. And I do want to shift back the focus onto Brad, just kind of breaking down this call. 'Cause I know you and I have talked about doing these kind of things on the episodes before, but I do think it is pretty crazy how his actual career pursuits mimicked his athletic career, in the sense that he just chased what he was good at or an opportunity that he had instead of really following his passion. Luckily, he recognized early enough what his passion was and was able to pursue it. So props to him on that. But I just think that's a crazy thing. It is cool that it has worked out for him, and I know he's happy, but wild.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good distinction, and I'm glad it got to that point of if the money wasn't as good as it was initially, no, even if it was his passion, he wouldn't have done it. So, like, people that do say, "Hey, follow your passion," there's an extent where monetary side of things comes into play for you to actually pursue. I mean, you more than anybody probably has followed their passion more than anybody that I know, no matter what. So I think there's scales to it. But especially moving from the corporate side of the world, I even if you don't like what you do, there is a monetary piece to that decision, which I'm glad he made that distinction.
Yeah,
Um, Go ahead.
and there were calculated pieces in his athletic move as well. He was a scholarshiped athlete, so it's not like that was completely on him. Brad has always, it's one of the things that I really value in him as a friend and a person, or I find admirable. He doesn't make stupid decisions ever. Like he's a calculated individual. And yeah, sometimes that might limit how much fun we can have because he's not just going to go out on a limb and take some crazy risk, but also he took a he went to UIC to be a scholarship soccer player. He transferred to a junior college to be a scholarship basketball player and then take a chance on what he could do next. He's also was extremely academically proficient, so that was never going to hold him back either. He did have a lot of things playing in his favor, but I think that is kind of the perfect example of what you just said. He did take a risk or take the leap of faith, but he was also able to do it because of calculated decisions or work that he has put in previously to put himself in a good spot to take that chance.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point on the academic side. I'm sure any high school athlete has heard their coach say, "Get your grades good, get your grades good." And the good players don't take it that seriously sometimes. And there is a realization when you want to go to the big D1 school, and there is a limitation. You have to still get a certain test score. You still have to have a certain GPA. It doesn't matter how good you are. And sometimes that can leave you in a sticky situation. I mean, I'm not going to say his name, but a kid I grew up with, he he thought he was very good, and this did work out for him in the end. He didn't take the SAT or ACT. He had a verbal commitment to, I believe it was Florida State, but didn't take the tests because he's like, I'm getting drafted. Like, that's it. I'm getting drafted out of high school and I'm going. He did get drafted. It was a later round, so he probably didn't get as much money as he thought he would have. But he had to take it because he didn't have any other option because he didn't take the tests.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's definitely a good perspective, and I realized that with Brad because also, I mean, the budgeting question. I was hoping for a little bit more of like, yeah, that was kind of like a hard thing at first, like living off of one paycheck for 3 months. But he sort of had that perspective going into the corporate world, which not everyone has. But I was hoping it was going to be a different answer, but
Yeah,
it is what it
and
is.
I mean, looking beyond even what we talked about here, and it's things that we can pull from. Brad was living in the city of Chicago. He was working in the city of Chicago. He could have taken that initial paycheck, gone downtown, lived with friends in the Gold Coast, and had the single greatest life of a 23, 24-year-old. But instead, he elected to live at home with his family, save money, take the commuter rail into Chicago to work, and then even went back. I don't even remember when he got his first place, but he has always made calculated decisions. So yeah, it we probably could have had some fun budgeting discussion with him, but it's one of the things that we've gotten to witness as his friends is he's just always made the smart move there.
Yeah. I one question I didn't get to ask him, and maybe eventually we'll get the answer from him, but it is very interesting to me, like, if his siblings and him have ever talked about, we're all in education, our parents are in education. How did we all get here? And I'm curious if that discussion's ever happened.
Yeah, I don't know if the three of them could be in a room and have that of a discussion, but yeah, that would be a really interesting topic. And speaking of things that I don't think or maybe we wanted to ask and didn't get to talk about, I would have loved to spend more time on the time management piece, especially with he and his wife, not just how he juggles his school, his team. I know he also coaches AAU, so he has stuff going on constantly, but also he is a teacher who has a full summer and he plays golf all the time. So we know he does have free time, but he also let on to us that he and his wife don't have free time at the same time unless it is summer. There's just so much to that I find very interesting, especially with the journey of life that I am embarking on, learning more about what Corey and I can get into, or how we can handle that stuff as we continue to move forward in our relationship. But I selfishly wanted to learn more just about his experiences there.
No, I mean, I definitely could benefit that for my future self. Obviously, I don't have anything going on really, so it was funny. Q and I were talking the other day, and he was like, you know, we can do what we want, and I was like, yeah, like that's the perspective. Like, if I want to go fly somewhere last minute, I can. If I want to do something, like this is the time to do it. Brad did put a good perspective when you were trying to get into the routine thing, and like
hmm
it was a unique answer of him saying like, I am just trying to figure out how to get more time. How can I get time? Like that was the focus of that. At least that stood out to me, which I don't think a lot of people think about when they're doing certain routines or things. They're not like, oh, this is gonna save me brain power. Perfect. Bring him
Should I
back
dial
on.
him in for those
I don't know.
who can't see? We're gonna pick up the phone for Brad and we're telling him we're rounding out the podcast. Oh,
Yeah,
never mind.
all
I
right.
let it ring out.
Yeah, I mean, we can close it out and then, but yeah, it was a good conversation. It was good perspective to have.
Definitely. Yeah, that was awesome. And I look forward to continuing the offline discussions with him.
Yeah,
But
maybe I can get a buddy weekend.
we need you up there. Banko, go ahead, take us home.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye everyone.
Hi, everyone. Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.